Imagine waking up tomorrow with no phone, no internet, no calendar, no emails, and absolutely no idea what anyone on the other side of the planet is doing. You don't know who's richer than you don't know who's more attractive, you don't know whether your old classmates are getting married, buying houses, travelling the world, or somehow becoming successful while you're sitting on the couch eating cereal at 11 p.m. You just wake up. You hunt, you gather, you avoid getting eaten, and when the sun goes down, you sleep. Now here's the strange part. For most of human history, people lived incredibly difficult lives. They faced hunger, violence, infections, childbirth, injuries, predators, and extreme weather. And yet, they didn't have therapists. They didn't have psychologists. They didn't have self-help books telling them how to set boundaries with their emotionally unavailable neighbour. So here's the question. Were ancient humans somehow mentally tougher than us? Did they simply have fewer psychological problems? Or is there something much stranger going on? Because modern humans live in the safest, most comfortable environment our species has ever created, and somehow our brains seem more overwhelmed than ever. The answer begins with something ancient humans had that we almost completely lost. A world small enough for the human brain. Imagine you're a hunter living roughly 50,000 years ago. Your entire universe might consist of a small group of people. You know their names, you know their personalities, you know who's funny, you know who's annoying, you know who's trustworthy, you know who can find water, you know who can track animals, and you probably know when someone is having a bad day. Your social world is incredibly small, and that matters. Because the human brain evolved inside groups where relationships were immediate and personal. If you had a conflict with someone, you couldn't block them. You couldn't leave them on scene. And there was no option to disappear into another room and spend 6 hours watching strangers argue online. You had to deal with the person, face to face. And that sounds exhausting. But psychologically, it may have had an advantage. Your problems were usually concrete. You're hungry. Find food. You're cold. Find shelter. You're injured. Protect the wound. Someone is angry with you. Talk to them. There wasn't an endless stream of invisible problems competing for your attention. And then civilization changed the game. Suddenly, humans could store food, build permanent settlements, own property, create social hierarchies, trade, accumulate wealth, and eventually create something our ancestors could never have imagined. A world where your survival could depend on what people you've never met think about you. Think about that. Your ancient ancestor might worry about whether the neighbouring group would attack. You might worry about whether 3,000 strangers on the internet think you're attractive. Your ancestor might compare himself to the strongest hunter in his group. You can compare yourself to millions of people. And here's where things get weird. Your brain didn't evolve to handle that. Your brain is still running ancient software, but you've plugged it into a civilization that produces information at machine speed. It's like putting a Stone Age brain inside a supercomputer and expecting it not to crash. And the problem isn't simply technology. It's something much deeper. Stress. Stress is not automatically bad. In fact, ancient humans desperately needed it. Imagine you're walking through a forest. You hear a branch snap. Your brain doesn't say, "Interesting, let's examine the evidence." It says, "Move." Your heart accelerates. Your muscles tense. Your attention narrows. Adrenaline floods your body. For a few minutes, everything becomes incredibly simple. Survive the next moment. That's what the stress response is designed for. The problem is that modern life can activate that same machinery without giving it a clear physical event to resolve. An email, a deadline, a difficult conversation, money problems, social rejection, news from another country, a notification, another notification, another notification. Your body can react to all of these as threats, even though you're sitting perfectly still. And that's when the ancient system starts behaving strangely. Because the tiger never sends you an email saying, "Just checking in, still thinking about you." The tiger attacks. Or it doesn't. Modern threats can remain unresolved for weeks, months, even years. And that changes the psychological game completely. But here's what almost nobody realizes. Ancient humans absolutely experienced fear, grief, loneliness, trauma, and emotional suffering. They weren't immune to mental pain. We should be careful about romanticizing prehistoric life. People died young. Children died. Communities experienced violence. Natural disasters happened. Injuries could be catastrophic. So the idea that ancient humans were walking around completely stress-free is nonsense. The real difference may have been what happened around those emotions. Imagine someone in a small hunter-gatherer community losing a loved one. They wouldn't process that grief alone in a silent bedroom while scrolling through their phone. The people around them would know. They would see the grief. They would participate in it. They might tell stories, perform rituals, sit together, cry together, work together. Humans have probably always needed emotional support. And that's the twist. Ancient humans didn't not need therapy. They had something that sometimes performed similar psychological functions without being called therapy. Community. This is where the story gets even more interesting. Human beings are extraordinarily social animals. Our brains are deeply affected by whether we feel accepted, rejected, useful, or isolated. For most of human history, being disconnected from your group wasn't merely uncomfortable. It could be dangerous. Food, protection, information, childcare, and companionship all depended heavily on other people. So evolution gave us powerful social instincts. We care what others think. We notice rejection. We seek approval. We form attachments. We imitate. We cooperate. And we suffer when those connections disappear. Now look at modern life. You can live in a city of millions and barely know your neighbors. You can have hundreds of online followers and still feel completely alone. You can spend an entire day surrounded by people without having one meaningful conversation. And this is where modern therapy enters the picture. Therapy isn't evidence that humans suddenly became weak. In many cases, it's evidence that we've created environments where our ancient social and psychological systems can struggle. Therapy gives people something humans have always needed: a safe relationship where you can speak honestly. Someone listens. Someone helps you organize your thoughts. Someone helps you recognize patterns. Someone can challenge beliefs that are hurting you. And sometimes, simply putting an experience into words changes how you understand it. But there's another uncomfortable truth. Therapy can't replace everything humans evolved to need. You can talk about loneliness for an hour, then walk outside and still have nobody to eat dinner with. You can understand your anxiety and still spend the next 6 hours staring at a screen. You can learn about healthy relationships and still live in a world where everyone is busy. This is why the answer isn't ancient humans were better, and it isn't modern humans are broken. It's that our environment changed much faster than our biology. Evolution moves slowly. Culture moves quickly. Technology moves ridiculously quickly. Your nervous system didn't get a software update when smartphones appeared. Nature clearly didn't get the memo. And that mismatch explains something fascinating about modern anxiety. Your brain is constantly predicting the future. That's useful. It helps you prepare. But give that prediction machine unlimited information, and it can start generating threats indefinitely. What if I fail? What if they don't like me? What if I lose my job? What if I'm behind? What if everyone else is doing better? What if something goes wrong? The possibilities never end. And unlike a predator, you can't simply run away from all of them. So perhaps the biggest difference between our ancestors and us isn't that they had fewer emotions. Maybe they had fewer places for those emotions to accumulate. Their days contained long stretches of physical activity. Their social worlds were smaller. Their problems were often immediate. Their attention wasn't being auctioned every few seconds. And when something happened, other humans were usually right there. Meanwhile, modern humans have built an extraordinary civilization and accidentally created an environment our brains were never designed to inhabit. But there's one final twist. We shouldn't try to become ancient humans again. You don't need to abandon electricity, move into the forest, and start hunting deer with a stick. The lesson isn't that the past was better. The lesson is that your brain still has ancient needs. Connection, movement, purpose, rest, nature, belonging, meaningful relationships, and periods where you're not constantly being interrupted. Maybe the goal isn't to live like our ancestors. Maybe it's to build a modern life that remembers what our ancestors' brains were designed for. Because the strange truth is, we didn't evolve to be happy every second. We evolved to survive, connect, cooperate, explore, and find meaning. And sometimes, the modern world gives us everything we could possibly want, except the things our brains actually recognize as important. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, don't immediately assume there's something wrong with you. Your brain may simply be doing exactly what it evolved to do, inside a world it never evolved to understand. And maybe that's the real reason ancient humans didn't need therapy in the way we think of it today. Not because they were stronger, not because they didn't suffer, but because for thousands of generations, human beings lived inside the kind of social and physical world their brains were built for. We changed the world. Our brains didn't get the memo. And perhaps the question isn't whether modern humans need therapy. Perhaps the more interesting question is, what would happen if we built a modern life that required a little less therapy in the first place? If you enjoyed exploring this mystery, subscribe to the Primal Logic for more fascinating stories about humans, nature, science, and the hidden reasons behind the world around us.